Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. We are going to kick this week off strong with a great guest. And joining us in just a moment is a company called hc1.com. And we have the CEO with us, Mr. Brad Bostic. So, and we're going to learn all about what they do and, how they do it. So, but before that, a couple of things to mention, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, a link to our guest website, any articles that we do later on in the program. Just anything and everything we do here at Computer America can be found at our website. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and be sure to check out the video portion of the show, which is brought to you by OWC. So, with I think with that out of the way, again, I hope all of you had a great weekend and you are ready to, ready for today's show. So, why don't we go ahead and just get started here? So, as I said, hc1.com, to tell us about what they do and how they do it is, again, Brad Bostic, who is the chairman and CEO. So, Brad, welcome onto Computer America.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So why don't we go ahead and just get a bit of a background on the company and a bit of background on yourself. How did you find yourself working with hc1?
Sure, thanks. So my background really has been in building technology-enabled service companies across multiple industries. And what I found when I was working outside of healthcare was that there tended to be a very intense focus on how you could organize information around the customer to deliver a more personalized experience. So I used the sort of simple example that you order a teddy bear on Amazon, they treat it like that's life or death to get it to you on time and deliver a great service to you and use information gained through that experience to serve you better in the future. But you can go through a healthcare experience where it may actually be life or death and be treated like a number. And it was really that reality that led me to found hc1.com and deliver on what we call healthcare relationship management, which is really all about how can you understand relationships and behaviors in healthcare based on data in order to deliver a more personalized experience that has a much better result for the consumer and can be delivered at a lower cost with higher quality, which is a huge piece of what's happening right now in the healthcare industry with all the reform, is trying to move away from a fee-for-service model to more of a quality-based model. So those were the main factors that went into the reason HC1 was started, and now it's emerged to be the leader in that space.
Very, very cool. Oh, and just real quick, actually you mentioned this. I hate to deviate so early or, kind of go off, not script, but to, ask you another question. But a lot of people come on the show, a lot of companies, and I always ask, what need are you feeling and things like this. With the explanation that you just gave, my initial reaction is, why do you think the need that you're feeling even exists in the first place? Because healthcare is very personal. You're right. It's someone's relative, it's yourself, it is life or death in many situations. Why did healthcare get to a point where, and I know the show's only an hour long, but just real quick, why do you think either hospitals or insurance companies or whoever's pushing this change, just why is healthcare so, not personal at this point?
Yeah, and that answer could require more than an hour, but I'll give you the short version of that answer. So the way that healthcare has really been built in the United States has centered more around individual caregivers providing certain types of specialized services. And the way that, for whatever reason, those services are paid for has been on what's called a fee-for-service model, which means that if you provide some kind of a medical procedure or a surgery, there's a way to bill insurance, either commercial insurance or Medicare, for those services, and you receive a standard payment amount in this fee-for-service model for providing those services. And there really has been no connection between the level of quality that you're delivering and the amount that you would get paid. So what really has happened, and it's not due to anybody necessarily having bad intentions, but we've created an environment whereby the focus is on volume of services provided, and with a fixed amount that gets paid for each service that is provided, there also is a bit of an incentive to provide many services. And so that has also led to a bit of a lack of that volume mentality, has led to just the practical reality of not having enough time in the day to really provide a highly personalized level of service. Mm-hmm. So you've got pressure to do more volume, and you don't have as much time. It's not like the good old days when the doctor would do house calls and show up and know everybody in your family. And that kind of volume-based reality has really made it a bit of an impersonal approach. And the other thing I would say is the way that data has been organized historically has also been very siloed. So information about you when you go to one caregiver in a healthcare journey isn't exchanged or shared with necessarily the next provider or caregiver that you might see. So if you have some kind of a surgery in a surgery center and then you go over to a skilled nursing facility to get rehabilitation, that skilled nursing facility might not have the details of everything that was gathered about you, for example, any allergies you might have, or family history for certain issues, or medications that you might be on that could lead to falls. That sort of thing might be absent when you go to that next step in your healthcare journey. And it's that lack of information sharing that makes it extremely difficult to provide a personalized level of service. It's like the Amazon example I gave earlier. Mm-hmm. What if Amazon retained no history on all the things that you'd bought in the past, or all the things that you might be interested in, or music you might listen to? And the ability to kind of unify all that information about you and build a very informed profile is what leads to this personalization that can be delivered on. And I think it's the incentives in healthcare and the way that it's been created that has led to a lack of that. But I think the good news is there is a general recognition that this lack of information access is leading to a lot of the issues that we face in our healthcare environment. So there has been a big focus on digitizing the information, and I think now there are major strides being made, and we're helping to drive this around the fact that there are ways securely that information can be combined and aggregated and organized so that you can provide this more personalized approach that ultimately leads to better care and lower costs and all these things that we aspire to achieve. But that just gives you a little bit of the history on how and why we've ended up with a bit of an issue around how healthcare is delivered, where it is very impersonal and kind of one size fits all in many cases.
No, very succinct for, you're right, a very complex question. But I guess you mentioned it there, securely. Many companies that that have web services that deal with especially medical records and things like that. They, like everyone, Actually, we just had a company on, I think Friday, where they do cloud services, and while they just store data, they really don't read it, they don't analyze it, they don't parse it or anything. They have to be HIPAA compliant, and the amount of stress that or at least the amount of steps that people go through to make sure that data is secure, especially when dealing with medical records, is enormous. So I guess I'm going to ask you point blank, how security minded are you at hc1, and how can you mix that that level of we'll keep your data secure and safe, along with we also will aggregate data and try to, like you said, streamline or make changes, or because data is, very personal, but the data that you need to make some of these changes you're talking about, you need people's personal data. How do you balance that?
Well, so one thing that's critical is you need to at least be adhering to what HIPAA requires, which you mentioned that earlier. And we go way above and beyond what HIPAA requires. And the beauty of it is if you build technology with today's compute power, and you mentioned the cloud, we happen to use Amazon Web Services as our infrastructure partner, you can get to a level of security that was unprecedented even 10 years ago. And so what HIPAA requires is that information needs to be transmitted in an encrypted manner, and there are lots of different processes that you need to follow, which is something that any responsible healthcare technology company would do. But what you can do also is go well above what HIPAA requires and, for example, encrypt information at rest in addition to in transit. Make it so that you've got a system model that is roles-based, such that an individual who doesn't need to see any personal health information would not even be able to see that, even if within their organization there was coverage through what's called a business associates agreement, which is what third parties who are storing information that contains personal health information need to be governed by. So what we found is that the historical approach to managing information within healthcare, with more of the traditional data center that's down the hall with the door locked and the servers all in there, is much less secure than more of a modern architecture that uses the best that the cloud can offer. And it's not just about encryption, though. It's also about being specialized in healthcare. And this is why companies that try to come into healthcare just as another market to try to sell into, but they have a product that works across multiple industries, it's incredibly difficult to adhere to the level of rigor that's required to make what you're doing completely secure, because you need to have a data model that understands, for example, even which data elements are PHI or personal health information. And there's a lot more to it than what that sounds like. So what we've done is architected from the ground up to contemplate both how do you organize the information in a way that makes it actionable and useful to improve healthcare, but also how do you make it so that people who really require access to PHI inside of the healthcare delivery environment can see that information as needed, like the actual caregivers, right? But then when you go outside of that type of an individual, there really doesn't need to be access to PHI. So the architecture and the roles-based approach allows you to limit that. But then if you're dealing with more just looking at trends and benchmarking,
Right.
you actually take out any PHI altogether. So ultimately that data, when you start getting into doing more measurement to try to look at how populations are progressing from a health perspective, there is no link there to an individual. It's more just giving you an understanding that, for example, males in Indiana who are from 40 to 50 years old are having a lower incident of prediabetes, or which wouldn't that be nice if that were the case? But so there are multiple levels to that answer to that question, And it really helps being a specialist in healthcare where it's all you do. So you have an entire staff who are focused on making sure that everything is not only useful and actionable, but also highly secured.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, currently dominating the news is, all the hubbub about Facebook and data and the improper use of such. But I think stories like that also highlight, even at, it's not even, really important data. It's data such as, where people live, what they do, things that they'll freely share with you in a conversation. And we see that just that, very skin deep level of data can be incredibly effective and incredibly powerful for things like influence or trends or things like that. The data that you're talking about, if there was a system to put it all together to see trends and to go even deeper, I'm surprised the healthcare industry isn't, chomping at the bit. Instead, I guess it's that whole thing where you're adapting an old industry to new technology, and that can take some time, and that takes a lot of effort. So I can see where you're going with this, and it's very exciting. I guess just one quick question. Are you making anyone mad with your product? Like, are insurance companies anxious that you're coming into the market? Are doctors mad that you are providing a new platform? Are patients, kind of sitting back and saying, oh, look, another company I have to share my information with? Are you making anyone mad, or are you playing nice with all of the existing players?
We certainly are set up in a way that fits right in nicely into the existing environment and equation. So we don't require the customers that we work with, which are healthcare organizations, to make big changes to their environments to take advantage of this. What we do is plug in and provide a level of action and accountability that was lacking before. So we're making it better for the providers, better for the patients, lower cost. And you raised some of the examples of, in the more consumer-centric world, how things are really used for advertising and targeting and all that. That's really not part of the hc1 model or what we do. It's really more focused on unlocking answers to solve healthcare's biggest challenges.
Right.
And the places where we drive action are things like, if you see an urgent and critical lab result, what's the most effective and accountable method for communicating that information to the appropriate caregivers so they can actually intervene and take action so that you don't have a bad outcome, with the actual patient. So we're not really in the business of that outside use of information like you described. It's more about how within the healthcare organizations can you help them unearth the insights that they need to drive action and accountability, and then how do you actually drive those actions through technology where it actually powers a workflow that says, here's this information, you need to take action on that. And then the system tracks and measures how long it took to do that and ensures that that occurred. So we really have not had an approach that is controversial at all. It's more of this very common sense reality that you've got all this data that's trapped in all these silos that needs to be organized better and driven, put into action effectively so you can make healthcare better.
Right.
And for the patient, what we do is largely invisible except for the fact that they get a better service level. So that patient that ended up getting an intervention quickly because there was a critical lab result, they don't know that hc1 is the enabling central nervous system that made that occur. So there's really no reason for them to be upset. So yeah, we haven't been designed to create any kind of a big disruption. It's more of a facilitator.
Yeah, that was where I was looking for, was you're not a big disruptor to the market. You are a facilitator. And again, I was just using the examples of, Facebook's and advertising. I don't ever assume that hc1 would ever go out and say, all these pre-diabetic patients, they would love some insulin advertising targeted right to them. It was more just, data is important. It does have power. And, the kind of data that you have is very, very powerful to the people who, it's about. So, so with that being said, I see here that you have a new product, and opioids have received a lot of attention. There is a, very well named crisis going on with opioids. Talk about the hc1 opioid dashboard. How does it work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, our passion really is around unlocking answers to solve healthcare's biggest challenges. And one of those challenges today that we see in the news a lot is this issue with the misuse and abuse of opioids. And there are many people who struggle with pain, and there are completely sensible and appropriate situations where it's important for those folks to have relief from that pain, and opioids have become one of the common types of drugs used to treat pain. But what we've ended up seeing happen, though, over a period of time is that these drugs can be extremely addictive, and if not managed very carefully, can lead to some very bad consequences. So one of the major areas that we look at within our hc1 customer base and partners is where can we identify key trends that can allow you to get more predictive and preventative to prevent things like overdoses or the spread of disease through needle sharing, these things that can cost society enormously, both in terms of having fatalities, which is the ultimate loss, as well as just the costs that are driven from all the emergency room visits and the things that are just not sustainable from an economic perspective. So what we've done with our hc1 opioid dashboard is really brought together a coalition of various parties that are doing what's called toxicology testing, which is testing to see what types of drugs are present in people's systems. So this, again, is something that's completely de-identified and anonymized, but it gives you information now at a national and state level to identify both what are the early warning signs that we might have something brewing that we should intervene on, as well as how do we measure the effectiveness of the programs that we're actually implementing in our states to combat opioid misuse and abuse. So things like how do I see that we've got a significant increase in a given area for the use of fentanyl or some other type of drug that might be a precursor to something that could turn into like a heroin epidemic. So maybe I want to go target education programs or treatment centers or do more education for the providers in that area. So what you can do with this, if you're a public health agency or like, for example, the state of Indiana, which is one of the users of this solution, is instead of waiting for the hurricane to hit you and having no ability to prepare to try to minimize the damage, this allows you to actually identify what's coming and get prepared and take action to minimize those adverse consequences. So that's, in summary, what we're doing. That is an example of personalizing the way that you can deliver programs that give you a lot more insight into where you need to focus, which another example I'll give quickly is you may have the assumption that inappropriately says, well, the people who are using or misusing and abusing these drugs are all the folks who live under the bridge downtown and, in a cardboard box, which is completely inaccurate. What you actually find is that this is an issue that really is more of a disease state, if you will, that cuts across all different types of people and all different demographics. And if I can see, hey, we've got a significant rise in the use of fentanyl in this high income or more higher median income bracket, that tells me I need to take different action than if I found this was hitting a different part of the population hard. So it's really all about getting more proactive and preventing the terrible consequences of this issue.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, if you have been keeping up to date with the reporting of of this the use of these pain relievers, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not just the people, down by the bridge. It's, anyone who experiences pain, and that knows no bounds. Everyone has experienced pain at some point, and so there's a equally high chance for really anyone to be affected. Now, everything you said there made sense, but from what we've been seeing with opioids, we've been taking a very, kind of criminal approach to this, where people who abuse it, they are criminals. Doctors who overprescribe it, they are criminals. It's. I guess we don't really ask the question of, why does a small town, I think it was like in West Virginia, need, like hundreds or tens of millions of opioids, and we don't ask that question until after. Is that kind of what you're hoping to do with this dashboard? Is, what are the effects, and, are we over, under prescribing these kind of things? Like, are you trying to get to it before it gets to that criminal state, or are you working with, law enforcement and state agencies?
Yeah, it's absolutely the case that we're looking to create an environment that can be more preventative and make it so that for us, it's more about how do you manage this as a disease state. Just like if somebody was diabetic, you can become type 2 diabetic because of lifestyle decisions. And this is a disease state that doesn't have the stigma with it. It has a stigma, but it's a different one than what is going on with the stigma around drug addiction. Mm-hmm. And so I think, first of all, we need to change the mindset about this and say this is a disease state. The people who are affected hardest by this they have a certain genotype, phenotype that makes it so they're predisposed to having these issues. And how do we then take the steps of saying, let's do more of a comprehensive care management approach to help people address this? And if there is more of a mindset that it's a disease state, I think it makes it a lot more likely that the people who are in need of help will take action and get help, and then the caregivers can provide help in a way that's more considered, hey, I'm helping somebody really manage through and conquer a disease, which can happen and does happen successfully for many people. So our focus is more on the side of health and improving health than it is on the criminal justice side. I think another piece of what you mentioned there about the issue with is this a criminal activity, or are these people all criminals? In some cases, you'll have somebody who's a physician in the pain space who is appropriately prescribing high doses over a long period of time because, for example, they're dealing with individuals who have advanced cancer. If your patient census is made up of people who are extremely sick, that's a totally different scenario than somebody who's just got people coming in saying they've got a toothache and they're giving them, 100 pills of OxyContin. Right. And those are real things that happen. And so I think this is another reason that we need a more of a healthcare relationship management mindset and approach that understands the context of where and why are these prescriptions being given. Because if you think about the first group that sees a high level of prescribing is going to be the insurance companies, because they're getting all of these claims that are coming through that they need to pay for all of these drugs. And so they, pay for the drugs through the insurance process. But the insurance company has no idea at that point in time where they're making the payment what the reason is for the prescribing down to the level of the real clinical detail. They just know that here's an example where somebody has gotten this prescription that's covered by our insurance that we need to pay for this. And so that's a big movement that's underway, is for the people who are actually paying for healthcare to get a lot more insight and more of a live, real-time environment on what's happening and why are these things being done, and does that actually make sense? Is that actually, clinically appropriate? So there are things like pre-authorizations now that are being required where you at least have to evidence that there's a good reason for what you're doing. One thing I think in the future will happen is
Well,
eventually
and
we'll be.
actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Brad, I'm actually going to stop you right there. We're about to head into break. Would you mind staying over for a few minutes so we can wrap up this conversation?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Sure. All right. So everyone talking with us here on Computer America is Mr. Brad Bostic, doing a great job and he is the chairman and CEO of hc1, where we talk about advances in healthcare and how technology is going to play a big part in that. So everyone, stay tuned. More Computer America and more hc1 right after this. Stay tuned.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Why? Because you can save 45% on packages compared to your high-priced cable bill. Wow. Take those giant scissors out and cut the cable and save with Dish TV. Plus, you get a free DVR upgrade to record your favorite shows and free installation. And with Dish Anywhere, you can watch TV for free on your mobile device. Act fast. You can save hundreds of dollars. Does your cable company do that for you? I don't think so. Get all the best TV programming at your fingertips at a fraction of the price of cable TV. So say adios, arrivederci, goodbye to the high cable bill and save up to 45% on Dish TV packages today. These are limited time offers and can change at any time. Call fast.
800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. That's 800-471-5325.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. If you missed any part of today's show, feel free to head on over to wherever podcasts are heard, or of course places like YouTube. And you can catch the show in its entirety rebroadcast. That's all the podcast is. So if you miss us, don't worry, we got you covered. So with that being said, continuing on with us for a couple more minutes is Mr. Brad Bostic. He is the chairman and CEO of hc1. And Brad, I'm sorry I had to stop you there, but you were getting into the future of the dashboard, because if everything goes right, if hc1 is able to do its vision and everyone adopts this, what does the future of the dashboard look like, and how does all this play out?
Yeah, so it's really becoming the world's most widely connected platform for healthcare relationship management that combines these different elements to create context that you need to drive the right sort of action and accountability. So you see that this is the scenario within a given population where it is appropriate for these higher prescribing levels to be given, and being able to continuously monitor that those are appropriate, or on the other end of the spectrum, seeing that, hey, here's an indication that there are issues. How do you intervene immediately so that you can send the care pathway down a better course and have lower cost and higher quality? But thinking way out there on the horizon, the desire is, and the plan is, to make it so that you have truly personalized healthcare, which goes all the way from the service levels in which you're engaged, even just things like ensuring that you're following up for the appropriate type of care based on genetic predisposition for a given issue. My mom, for example, died of colon cancer, and had she been more informed and been more engaged, that's something that was just very easily preventable. And she was a very healthy person generally. It's just, that was the one thing. And so for me, I look at that as a very personal, impactful example of why healthcare needs to be personalized. How do we make it so that people aren't letting issues like that lead to very high cost episodes of care and then ultimately can lead to death? So for us at hc1, we wake up every day thinking about how can we unlock answers to solve healthcare's biggest challenges, and how do we personalize healthcare so that every person is engaged in a way that's most appropriate for them, and really makes it so that you're not treated like a number, but instead you're treated like the very important person that you are as an individual who can and will, in that scenario, be able to live the longest, healthiest life possible.
Right. So, last question for you, and I'm kind of interested in this because, when you get the formula down, when you get the infrastructure in place, when you get everything said and done, being able to provide different types of services becomes much, much easier. One personally, it's one that my brother's a chemist, and he is extremely worried. Well, he's doing other things, but he's extremely worried about antibiotics and the fact that they are overused and they are less effective, and it's a problem. So I'm going to ask you, what are some other applications? And if you aren't working on it, can one of those applications be opioids? Keep doing it, very important. But also, would this work for things like antibiotics?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the antimicrobial resistance issue is absolutely a major concern. And there are many programs that are being instituted across the country in our health systems to reduce the amount of antibiotic prescriptions, ensure that they're appropriate. And you always hear the horror stories about the nightmare resistant bacteria that are showing up where they aren't susceptible to any known antibiotic. And that is absolutely another example where it's all about having the information to understand what is required and when it's required from an antibiotic prescribing perspective to engage people appropriately and inform them in a way that relates to the broader body of evidence of what really works and what doesn't work, and what scenario and what are the indications that tell you it is time for antibiotics. But in other cases, how do you ensure that you're kind of using that as a last resort? A sidebar on that is not only do you end up with antimicrobial resistance issues when you overuse or inappropriately use antibiotics, but it also is very destructive to kind of your body's natural processes and gets you off balance from an overall digestive standpoint. I mean, there are all kinds of realizations of why it should be more of a last resort instead of a first step. So you're right. There's a pattern here that's about understanding the relationships and behaviors and then driving positive change based on that. And the antibiotic issue is another one. Diabetes is another one that we're really attacking with a predictive machine learning algorithm that can predict who is likely to become pre-diabetic well before they ever would have had symptoms or run the kind of specific tests that relate to diabetes. So I think there are just a world of possibilities, and your intuition is correct that as we have created our platform and started bringing these solutions to market, it's just the beginning, and there are many different opportunities we have to make healthcare better.
Yeah, and I see that you are absolutely working with everyone, and trying to make that a reality. It's I want to say that it's not an easy thing. I think a lot of people have looked at healthcare and said, "Wow, someone should really make that better." And it's a great goal. And hey, I hope the HC1 is able to do it, and actually is currently doing it. So that's definitely great to hear. So I'll go ahead and give you the last word. If anyone out there listening wants more information, where can they go?
Well, hc1.com, just hc1.com. It's a fairly comprehensive website, and there's an easy way to click a button that allows you to get in touch with one of our experts to learn more about any specific area that's most valuable to you. And we'd love to connect with anybody who's also interested in making healthcare better.
All right, perfect. And yeah, again, we have a link to that in the show notes at Computer America. And Brad, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. It was you know what you're talking about. That's amazing. Being the CEO of the company, that's important. But no, this was very enlightening and again a lot of fun. So Brad, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and have a great day.
You too. Have a great one. All right. So, and everyone, once again, if you want to check out, everything that we talked about, you can check out the podcast, you can check out the show notes. Anything and everything is available through Computer America. All things are possible through computeramerica.com. Yeah. So go ahead and jot that down. All right. So with that being said, why don't we go ahead and switch gears over to computer and technology news. And this is a segment dedicated entirely to news stories, different products, things like that. We have a ton of them. So here we go. Computer Technology News brought to you by OWC. All right. So our first story that we are going to cover today, and we have a couple very interesting ones. The first one, why don't we go ahead and talk about SpaceX? So always a lot of fun. Sometimes they blow up. Luckily, no fatalities. But that's kind of the thing about rockets is that it is rocket science. Well, they had a colossal failure a little while ago, and yeah, they said that the report came out, everything's finalized, and while they didn't specifically give what was wrong with the mission, because the mission was actually very secretive. It was a very hush-hush kind of project. But they were launching a satellite. It was called Zuma. And they said that it had a separation failure and that SpaceX was not at fault. So very important there. So yeah, again, this is just catching up on a little bit of news saying that it turns out SpaceX was indeed not responsible for the loss of a top secret government satellite that fell back to Earth and was destroyed following a Falcon 9 rocket launch earlier this year. And they said that the Zuma satellite purpose was highly classified, but the fate of the project, which is rumored to cost about $3.5 billion to develop, was covered in a high-profile fashion because it was intimately tied to a live-streamed SpaceX launch, which it was. Those SpaceX live streams were and continue to be one of the best ways to watch rockets, kind of launch. So, sources familiar with two separate federal and industry investigations tell the Journal that they blame the failure, or at least the failure rests with the failure of a payload adapter modified by top military contractor Northrop Grumman. There we go. Which also built the Zuma satellite itself. So, the payload adapter device struggled to operate in zero gravity conditions, saying that the device, purchased from a subcontractor, was significantly modified and then successfully tested 3 times on the ground by Northrop Grumman, according to one person familiar with the process. But upon reaching orbit, this person said the adapter didn't uncouple the satellite from the rocket in zero gravity conditions. That kind of makes sense. It makes a heck of a lot of sense. So pretty interesting stuff, saying that the sensors on board failed to immediately report what happened, so officials tracking the launch weren't aware of the major malfunction until the satellite was dragged back into the atmosphere by the returning second stage. So the satellite ultimately broke free, but then had dropped to an altitude that was too low for rescue. And in the aftermath of the successful Falcon 9 launch, word emerged that Zuma satellite separation had been far less successful, but because of the project's classified nature, there was no official word to be found. So, anyways, SpaceX said that they wouldn't comment, but that everything functions quote-unquote nominally from their point of view. So, if nothing else, this is just a little correction to SpaceX's history of successful and unsuccessful, operations. And yeah, turns out that this one was not on SpaceX's shoulders, but pretty interesting nonetheless. And again, rocket science. What works down here, and just say, oh, look, this works just like this, it works successfully, we're all good. Yeah, it turns out no gravity in space. So I don't know how we caught that or how we missed that, but yeah, there you go. All right, so there's that story, and now a little bit higher minded. And you think, but Ben, higher minded than space? Well, this one is about standardization, and that's awesome. So here we go. This is an article from Engadget, and John Fingus. I always like these kinds of articles because they set up what we're going to see in the coming years. And this next one is Ultra High Definition Group outlines next generation 4K TV broadcast. So these are the kinds of conversations that we have when we went from analog to digital, when all your cable boxes stopped working and you had to switch out, and people's rabbit ears wouldn't work as well or things like that. Yeah, these are the kinds of conversations that led to those innovations. Now we have a situation where we have the everything going from HD, 720 and, that kind of 720, 1080p, whatever. And now we're moving on to 4K. It's not just a select few, and it's not just, oh, hey, what are you going to do when, XYZ happens? This is, time to actually make changes. So the concept of a 4K TV broadcast is only just getting off the ground, but its overseers are already planning for what comes next, where the Ultra High Definition Forum has published its first Phase B guidelines detailing what companies should aim for the future 4K broadcast technology. And not surprisingly, high frame rates should play a major role, where the group is hoping for 100 frames and 120 frames video, depending on the region, with a fallback for 60 frames per second. So yeah, just as an update, movies are shot in 24 frames per second. That's when you get that, that cinematic feel. A lot of broadcasts are shot in 60 frames per second because that was the, highly debunked. The human eye can only perceive 60 frames per second. And folks, if you have ever seen the difference between 100 frames and 60 frames, yeah, there's a huge difference. So don't let that fool you. And they said that, and again, with a fallback to 60 frames, so higher frame rate. It's also pushing for dynamic HDR video, so high dynamic range in the form of Dolby Vision or SL HDR and HDR10, while Dolby AC4 and MPEG-H would provide audio that could adapt from elaborate 3D sound setups to a plain set of headphones. So yeah, again, these are all standards that we are going to be seeing implemented here in the next little while. And that means that whenever one member of an industry says that, hey, we are now compliant with, ultra high definition, then all the others are going to feel the pressure. It's going to be a race of who can do it first. And these are the benefits as the viewer that you're getting. Not only is 4K TV is the resolution. It's like 3860 by 2140 or something like that. Essentially, it's 4K is just a resolution. It gives you a bigger picture, which is cool. It's great. It's what we need. But a lot of the other stuff that makes up Ultra HD or Ultra 4K, however you want to say it, that is stuff that you will notice that is not just the size of the picture. It will be the smoothness, the 120 frames per second. It will be the color depth of what you're watching with dynamic HDR. It will be the ability to have either, a 7.1 surround system or 3.1 or even just headphones or, just any of those, and make sure that the sound actually sounds good across the spectrum. So all those are coming, and those are all, kind of what they're hoping to push for it, saying that all these additions are going to hike bandwidth demands, but the forum is betting on content-aware encoding, where encoders reduce data used in relatively stationary scenes to lower their requirements. So, providers and broadcasters can already handle 4K TV, might not have to plan another upgrade just to adopt high frame rate video, especially if their content involves a lot of still shots, where, hey, you can think things like golf or talk shows. Makes sense. So, saying that this is a set of guidelines, so it's going to be a while before TV providers and equipment makers start rolling out the hardware, but your brand new 4K set won't be obsolete for a while yet. Though, again, if you, honestly, if I was looking for, something to really invest my money in that I wouldn't be upset in 2 years, these seem to be pretty good guidelines as to what would be, kind of quote unquote future proof. 4K, of course, 120 frames per second, a high refresh rate, and HDR compatible. So that's HDR10 or Dolby Vision, and also make sure that it has a good sound system. So, Dolby AC4, things like that. All those combined should give you a dang good television, and then hopefully a future-proof television for, when in 3 to 4 years this becomes, standard. So, hey, if you're thinking about TV, there you go. Those are what I would consider to be kind of the baseline for future-proofing yourself. Not saying anything below that wouldn't be good, just saying that don't be upset when you start to see features that you don't have access to here in the near future. So, So with that being said, let's go ahead and skirt on over to our next story. We have time for like one or two more. Try to get some of these out. All right. How about this one? So, huge fan of PayPal. I think it's super easy to use. It's not an advertisement whatsoever, but I really do like what PayPal kind of does. And there's some bones to pick with how they do it in some particular instances that you can find online, but at the same time they do something that I think others try to emulate, but they don't do it as well. So now PayPal has announced that they will be rolling out new products for the quote-unquote unbanked in the weeks ahead. And this is by TechCrunch, Sarah Perez, and saying that PayPal is expanding into traditional banking through partnerships with smaller banks to offer consumers debit cards connected with their PayPal accounts, along with direct deposit for paychecks and other services. And the company says its new products are targeted specifically at the unbanked and will launch in the first half of 2018. Whereas PayPal itself is not a bank, it's been working with other banking partners behind the scenes to offer these new services. Where, for example, a Delaware bank issues the debit cards, and a Georgia bank helps with the photo from a smartphone. However, it won't charge monthly fees or require minimum balances. Already sounding pretty darn good. So, traditional banking customers may not want to pay for things like check deposits, but the lower fees will appeal to those who usually go to payday lenders and don't have regular bank accounts. And saying that, quote, "We're trying to bring more of those people into the digital economy. For folks who don't have a bank account, for folks who don't have credit cards or debit cards, we want to give them something so they're not turning to prepaid cards, check cashiers, and payday lenders." Which, I think is pretty well known. I'm not being crazy here. Payday lenders and, people like that, or people who cash checks exclusively, they're very predatory. They know that people who use their services are up against a wall, they have no other option, and, they can, kind of take advantage of the situation. So PayPal is looking to fill that void. And again, with much, much lower fees, they're still turning a profit, but at the same time, they're not, hey, at least they're, digital and cheap. So there you go. Saying that for the consumers already in our base that we see using things like loading cash directly onto a PayPal account in retail locations, we'll reach out directly. Saying that in some banking deserts, it may also invest in out-of-home advertising to reach these people without as many options. So they said that the company is not alone in targeting those underserved by mainstream banks, where Amazon was recently cited as having discussions with a bank, and you have other services such as Square's Cash App has been doling out bank cards to its users, and the PayPal-owned Venmo as well. And of course, there's there's a couple more that the article mentions, but hey, let's just get on with it. They say that PayPal says it's not going after millennials with its new products, just the unbanked population in general, saying that the banked and unbanked divide isn't necessarily along generational lines. Those that are unbanked don't have access to traditional financial services. We're giving them a pathway to the digital economy. So again, people who don't have a bank account for one reason or another, be that just in my mind, things like citizenship or things like credit score, or, just people who are wary of banks in general. It seems like PayPal's trying to reach out to them. So, good luck. They're not traditionally the, kind of most, they're underserved because it feels like they're not the most, people who are dealing with the most money, but at the same time, hey, this could certainly turn it around, and someone as large as PayPal can certainly do that. So pretty darn interesting. All right, so there's that one. I think there was, some of these I just know we're not gonna be able to get to. We had a story here about the new Huawei P20 Pro has 3 cameras. I don't know what's up with the number of cameras in a smartphone and why it's increasing and why it's automatically better to have multiple cameras. But yeah, Huawei have 3 cameras in a single phone. Also wanted to talk about things like Sony's Pro 4K camcorder and how it shoots in instant HDR and 4K raw footage. So very, very interesting. Definitely want to look into that some more. All right, so just a real quick one. Apple, you may have heard of them. They are a company that makes, smartphones and tablets. And they have announced that starting tomorrow, they will be selling red iPhone 8 and 8 Go Plus on sale tomorrow, as well as a red folio for the iPhone 10. And saying that for over a decade now, Apple has worked with HIV and AIDS charity Product Red, raising over $160 million for the nonprofit to date. And that money comes from the sales of scarlet colored covers, cases, Apple Watch bands, and special edition devices. And a recent rumor suggested that the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus would be the next to receive the Product Red treatment, which has just been validated by Apple, saying that the deep red editions will be available to buy online tomorrow and in stores from Friday, Apple. I'm sure Apple would love that. Friday, April 13th for the same price as the existing models. So there's no Product Red version of the iPhone 10, but it has a new claret colored $99 leather folio case that will be up for grabs tomorrow. So essentially, and it's weird. Something as simple and really not that important as the color of a device. Sometimes if people have been sitting on a phone and they've had the option to upgrade, but they really don't want to, sometimes just that little bit of incentive of it's special, it's different, and hey, you can get your hands on it. Sometimes just that is enough to get people to jump ship and to actually go buy a device. So, Product Red charity raises awareness and money for HIV and AIDS charity. Red iPhones coming to stores April 13th. So everyone, music means that we're done. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for listening to us here on Computer America. And yeah, we want to thank our guest, hc1, for, of course, joining us here on the program to talk about, hey, what they're doing with healthcare. If you missed any part of today's show, feel free to head on over to iTunes, Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Blog Talk Radio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Don't worry. Hey, we're there, and we are ready for you. So, hey, be sure to tune in tomorrow, same time, same place, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, as we talk with a company called Cypher Cloud. That's right. And hey, it's going to be a lot of fun. So everyone, until next time, thank you so much, and thanks for tuning in to Computer America. Have a great one. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and hey, catch you here tomorrow. Everyone, bye-bye.